Welcome to Fulfilling Career Happy Life. As I've mentioned, for season 3, really the theme here is digging deep into topics that sometimes we don't think about how they impact our careers. Now, confidence is our theme for today, and that feels a little bit more obvious how confidence can impact your career. But what I'm really talking about, what I hope we'll get into today, is that deep inner sense of confidence that can free you up to be your best. So it's not just seeming confident, which is really important, but it's that real deep inner sense so that you don't have to think about your confidence. It's just there. So that's kind of what we're looking at today. So I'm so happy to welcome our guest, Julie Delucca-Collins. Julie's a business and life strategy coach, and she focuses on empowering women to thrive while establishing or growing their business and life with unwavering confidence. And I love just saying that. She's also a speaker. She's, of course, a business coach, and she's the author of a top-selling book, Confident You. And she has her own podcast called Casa de Confidence. So she is the perfect guest for this topic of how confidence impacts your career. So, Julie, I'm so happy to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Randi. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Let me just, before we get into the meat of it, let me ask you, how did you get surrounded by this topic of confidence?
Well, that's a very easy answer. Number one, I'm a firstborn, and as a first child, confidence is a little bit of what we have. Also, my dad I would say middle school, he shared a quote with me by Henry David Thoreau, who he loved. And the quote is, "Go confidently in the direction of your dreams. Live the life you have imagined." So that kind of has become my mantra throughout my life. And at any time that I feel uncertain, afraid, unsure, I just remember, hey, go confidently, take a step, move forward. And that has definitely served me well. Now, I will say for the listeners that many times we see people from the outside and we think that they have it all together. And perhaps, that's a little bit of what you may think when you see my social media feed, when you meet me. And yes, there is a level of confidence, but it's not always there. It is something that I practice. And that's why confidence has been very near and dear to my heart. And when I launched my business, I wanted to help other women find the confidence to go and live the life of their dreams. Many women, when I was climbing the corporate ladder, would say, "Oh, I wish I was as confident as you." And again, I climbed. My last role was Chief Innovation Officer for an educational company out of New York that did work nationwide. And again, being on that C-suite, you think that this person has it together, but we don't. We struggle. We second guess ourselves. There's a little bit of imposter syndrome mixed in. But doing the work helps you build a confidence. And, I just talked about this in my TED Talk that came out about a month ago. So I'm very excited that this is a topic that is definitely near and dear to my heart.
It's great. Thank you so much. You said so much in there that makes me think. I love this. Go confidently in the direction of your dreams. It's so inspiring. It's so inspiring. Sometimes it feels like there's a distance between us and that. But then the other thing that you said that I love so much is you practice confidence. And I think about that, like, what are the things we practice? Yoga practice, mindfulness practice. I'm very big right now on my gratitude practice. And thinking of confidence as a practice makes it feel so much more, I don't know, accessible, forgiving. Like there's so much grace there if we're not perfect with it all the time. I love that so much.
Yeah, practice, it's one of the things. And I tell my clients that consistent action gets you traction. However, that first step in perfect steps is what gets you going. So it's very important to know that we are all going to hesitate, especially if something is new to us. We're not born knowing it all. We're not born doing it all perfectly. And even when we're doing it, perfection is a myth. So we really need to pay attention that, hey, let's normalize. I'm going to be new at this. I'm a beginner. I'm working at figuring this out, because every person that you see that is doing something well started with just that first step and started with practicing and got better the more that they did it.
Yeah. I I found that for myself, and I know a lot of the clients that I work with, the time that you just take on a new big level of responsibility is a time when maybe you lose touch with your confidence a little. At the time that you feel like I've just accomplished this big thing, you should be feeling all this confidence, and yet you're doing something new you've never done before. How do you know how to do it until you do it? And that's a time when you really need a lot of support for that. I found that myself. In fact, it's how I got
Mhm.
into coaching, but that's sort
Yeah.
of a whole other story. This is great. Okay, good. So one of the things that people will ask me about at times is, even if they consider themselves someone who is confident, they have maybe the words they describe it with our crisis of confidence. Like that confidence just goes away at times, and at times when you need it the most. Do you think that most people experience that? Is that unique to certain individuals? Because I think when people experience it, they feel like they are the only one that ever experienced it.
Mm. We tend to be very critical of ourselves. And when we think, I'm going through this, nobody understands, or this is what I'm feeling, we really do think it's only us. But the reality, and this is really one of the things that drives me, especially with my podcast and with everything that I do, is in an Instagrammable world, we need to take a look at the fact that when we see perfection outside of us and we compare, that perfection is not real. If I made a great video and I posted to TikTok, Reels, or whatever, and maybe it looks like I'm all put together, I may have dishes in my sink, or, my floor needs mopping, and maybe my laundry is sitting there, and I'm being real. In the last couple days, it's been a little hectic around here. So there's things that we end up prioritizing, and it would be very easy for me, Randy, to say, wow, who am I to do this? Who am I to tell people how to, go confidently if I am not very good at, right? Fill in the blank. And that happens to all of us. I want people to normalize and to neutralize those thoughts. Remember, hey, I'm telling myself that I'm terrible. I'm telling myself that I will never be successful. I'm telling myself, and then normalize that you're telling yourself, and neutralize it. Hey, everybody does that. Hey, I am a beginner. Hey, I'm working at practicing this. And then the more that we do that, because that awareness is the first step in allowing ourselves to feel self compassion and love for ourselves. Because, by the way, when people don't measure up and we care for them in our lives, we don't go criticizing them. We don't put them down, yet we do that so readily for ourselves.
What you're saying is so true. We're so much, very often I'll have a conversation with someone. All right, if you think that, what would you think about that if that was your best friend, your
Mm.
colleague that you respect, that kind of thing? It's very different often. I think what you're saying is really important, because normalizing those thoughts of self-doubt, lack of confidence in that moment, imposter syndrome, whatever words we want to put on it, I think is really important. I do find that, I don't know if everyone is correct, but nearly everyone has moments like that. It's just a matter of how do you adapt to it. And those thoughts, those things we tell ourselves are so important.
Yeah, 100%.
It's something I read recently. I don't know, maybe it's a common saying, but it was like really impactful to me, which was, you don't have to believe every thought you have.
Absolutely. I heard that somewhere, and I remember it's like, oh, and by the way, for your listeners, we have anywhere between 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day. Can you imagine the fleeting thoughts that are coming in? And for the most part, we're really running in this autopilot, and these thoughts that are coming up are really these things like the programs running in the background, or when you have your iPhone and you have multiple windows open and it's draining your battery. That is happening for you as well when we have these thoughts and we keep them open by believing them, right? We keep them open and we keep them running in the background. And again, there's places that maybe we failed. There's that teacher that maybe told us we'll never, whatever, or maybe in our family. And by the way, I want to normalize again that we could have grown up in the most loving, nurturing home, but still there will be instances, and maybe your parents didn't pay attention to you while you were doing something because something was happening, right? No shade on them, but humanity, right? It's what happens. And then you're going to find yourself sabotaging yourself because you become a people pleaser, because you tell yourself you have to please people. This is the only way people will love you. This is the only way to validate yourself. Maybe because your parents told you, hey, you need to be a good girl. You need to get good grades. And this is how you got attention, right? Again, nothing wrong with that. But what we end up doing is we really end up creating these mechanisms to protect ourselves. And this is the thing. And like you said, we end up believing these thoughts. And that's what sabotages us. And that's what creates a lot of the angst. It's what creates that inability to move forward, to stumble. I I don't know if you, Bonnie St. John, I had an opportunity to meet her. She spoke at an event here in Connecticut. She is a gold. No, she is an Olympic medalist. She was awarded a silver medal. She was in the Special Olympics, started skiing in her early uh, 20s, and went to the Olympics for skiing. There were so many other skiers that were much more talented than she was. But when she did her practice run, she qualified and actually beat everybody's time in the run. So when the actual run came out and the competition started, it was awful, awful, awful conditions, wind, it was terrible visibility. The snow was really packed and icy. And then the race started and she was coming along. And so was one of the biggest competitors and the number one ranked skier. As they were skiing down, both of them fell. And of course, they got up and kept going, and Bonnie made it second. When asked, how come you did such a great practice run and you fell during the main run, she said, my competitor fell as well. The difference between her and I, and the reason she has a gold medal, is because she got up faster than I did. And I think that this is one of the things we don't understand, that when we stumble, the faster we can get up, the faster we learn from the mistake, the more we can innovate. I read somewhere that Amazon has hundreds and hundreds of additional companies, initiatives, and things that they're launching every single day. However, you and I don't hear about them because most of them are failures, but we do hear about the ones that are successful. And that's what I want to hopefully have your listeners take away from this conversation. That confidence is about plugging along, getting up faster, normalizing that, hey, I fell down, let me get up again. That's the process, right? Just like Bonnie, like she fell, she could have beaten herself up. She's like, oh, I fell, okay, I'm never going to make it. No, I fell, let me get up. And she normalized the process that conditions are terrible, everybody else is falling, but I gotta keep going. And that's the most important thing that we can also do in our lives, in our business, and can propel us forward.
I think that's really important. And I think embracing that, it can be so productive. All of us stumble. All of us have, unless you're living on Instagram where everything does look perfect,
Yes.
all of us have, you know, challenges and difficulties and things that we need to overcome. And
Mhm.
it really is true that building that resilience is what helps you move forward. So, Julie, I know one of the things that you work with a lot of people on, you talk a lot about, is how habits can
Mhm.
help you feel confident and moving forward. And so, from a real practical sense for our listeners, how do you start moving? What are some tips you can use to get going when you feel really stuck, when you're in your own head and your confidence is low?
So glad you mentioned this. So, confidence is definitely one of these things that I've worked through and has been a close part of my life. But habits has also been the other one. As many people have done, I have read a lot of the books on habits, Atomic Habits, The Power of Habit. And it wasn't until I read the book by Dr. BJ Fogg, Tiny Habits, that all of a sudden things clicked in for me. Eventually, so much so that I became a certified Tiny Habits coach through the Tiny Habits Academy and Dr. Fogg's research. He is the person who the other habit books are based on his research at Stanford University. He founded the Behavior Lab. And again, one of the first things that he talks about is the anatomy of a habit. And this is important for your listeners to hear. A habit requires the ABC. Number one, A is the action, right? The ability to do whatever it is, the behavior, right? That's the first part of a habit. Number two, we have the behavior itself. The behavior itself is the other piece that is incredibly important for us to know that once we have the ability to do it, right? So if my phone is ringing, I'm going to have the ability to pick it up. That's my behavior, the ability and the behavior. Last but not least, what helps us create and solidify behavior so that it become habitual is making ourselves feel good. Our brain only changes when we feel good. So if you think about it, when we started walking and creating that muscle memory, is because we fell, right? We didn't know how to walk right away. We stumbled, but we had someone there saying, "Oh, good job, Julie. You did it. Get up." And then you kept going. So that's what happens with habits. The same thing with anything that you're good at. You praised yourself, you saw the result. There was something that allowed you to celebrate and feel good about this behavior. The other piece of this is that most people think that, I'm going to create a habit of working out every day. I'm going to create a habit of fill in the blank, right? Because all of us have a list of what we want to do. What ends up happening is that in the very beginning, we end up using motivation to help us create that new behavior. However, one of the things that Dr. Fogg talks about and a lot of the research shows is that when motivation is not available or motivation leaves and the action that we want to create is very difficult, then we're not going to want to do it. And we're not going to create the behavior. And then we're going to beat ourselves up. And the more that we beat ourselves up for not doing the behavior, not creating that habit, then we go down this spiral. Whereas if you start a habit by creating something so tiny, so small that you don't even have to rely on motivation to do it, right? Because it just becomes an automation. Then you celebrate that you actually did that tiny behavior. You can start to build your confidence because you're like, oh, I did it before. I can do it again, right? And that's one of the biggest things that we need to really understand, right? So, first, you need to find existing behavior that's going to be your prompt to remind you to do the new behavior. You do the tiny behavior and immediately you celebrate what you did and you give yourselves prop. And then all of a sudden, your brain's like, oh, we should do this again. And then you'd have that action that it's already automated, prompts you to do the new action that you want to create as a habit. And then you move into, again, celebrating. And all of a sudden, it's like a seed that you have planted that begins to grow because every time you do the habit, you're growing and watering your seed and it continue to expand. For many of us, again, we are so caught up in relying on that motivation in creating something so big. And the other place is that we don't understand that if we already have automations in our life, we need to pair the new behavior we want to create with that prompt. So, for instance, the phone ringing is a prompt that creates the ability for me to then answer it, right? However, a lot of people also don't understand. So I have clients that will say, "Hey, I want to do a gratitude journal," right? And this is something that I'm sure you've been doing. And if your gratitude journal, first of all, if the journal is in a place that you don't see it, you're not going to be prompted. For
Mhm.
me, I also do a gratitude journal and I have that in my side table next to my living room chair where I sit down to have my coffee. So that's my existing habit. I have coffee every morning. So when I bring my coffee to the living room to drink it, right? That's my prompt. It reminds me that my gratitude journal is there. And by the way, Randy, I am only going to open my journal. I'm not going to write. I'm not, because I don't want to make the behavior too big. So all I am doing is opening up my gratitude journal and then I celebrate. Now, guess what? 9 times out of 10, the journal is open and oh, I might as well keep writing, right? But on the days that I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. Okay, I just opened it, celebrate, I opened it. I am always successful. I'm always successful because that's the main little tiny action that I'm going for. And I feel good. So therefore, I go back to creating the behavior of opening the journal tomorrow and then maybe writing on it and continuing to grow that habit. And that's how it happens also for many of us in our lives. We need to find the moments in which we already have an automation. We need to then have that moment be what prompts us to do the new behavior we want to do, celebrate that we did it. And that's every time that we celebrate it and we get better at it, our confidence grows. And that's how habits and confidence work together.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me and is relatable in so many ways, big and small. I think the thing for our listeners to keep in mind is like describing these steps sounds like a lot of work, but it's not a lot of work. It happens fast, but any new habit takes repetition, takes intentionality. And
Mm.
it in some ways it feels a little counterintuitive because what you're trying to do is build a habit, establish that confidence so that it's there and you don't have to think about it. And in order to get to a place where you don't have to think about it, you have to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's exactly how it works. And our brain likes to automate behavior. Think about it. When you're driving, a lot of time you're not thinking like, okay, I'm gonna sit and I'm going to, this is how I turn the wheel or this is how I keep it straight. You're not thinking about that. You're driving. That's an automation. Sometimes you get home and you don't even know how you got there, right? Because you know how to get home. Your brain likes to be efficient. And that's what is happening. And that's what habits are the efficiency that our brain is creating so that we don't exhaust ourselves.
Yeah. This makes so much sense. And it's so funny because just in the course of the period of time we've been talking, I'm thinking about all the habits that I need to rethink and how much
Yes.
success I have in front of me if I can just break them down like that and
Yeah,
get a little bit more
absolutely.
efficient in those ways. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
This has been really, I think, a helpful conversation. If How can people find you if they want to read more about the things you've done and hear more from you?
Yeah. So I am Julie Delucca-Collins in all of the social media platforms. If people want to go to my website, it is goconfidentlycoaching.com. And if you just add /quick links to that. And I want to encourage individuals who maybe want to try the Tiny Habits method. I have a 5-day free coaching session that you can get there from myself or any of the Tiny Habits coaches. We do it for free. We don't try to sell you anything. It takes less than 3 minutes a day. And by the end of the week, you're going to know how to be able to create these tiny habits for your own life and create the recipes. 90% of the people that have gone through the Tiny Habits coaching program in these 5 days report that they have been able to create lasting habits. So I encourage people to do that. So again, it's goconfidentlycoaching.com/quick links, and you will see the 5-day coaching program there. You will also see a quiz that helps you figure out what your saboteurs are, what sabotages you. My best resources, you can get the book, Everything Me can be there.
Great. I appreciate you making that available to folks because I think, hopefully this conversation has helped them to see a bit about how finding those areas where your confidence is waning and where you can build the confidence, build some habits to turn things around, take control of it, and that can really be helpful. And these tools, I think, can be very helpful to our listeners. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Julie, thanks so much for being with me today. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. Randi, what a pleasure to be here with you. I'm so excited to be able to connect. You're doing some wonderful work, and I am a fan. Thank you again. And I hope that we continue to collaborate and do wonderful things together.
I hope so too. We will. We will. Thanks. Thanks so much for listening to Fulfilling Career Happy Life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, follow, rate, and review. Do all the things to show your support for this podcast. It helps other professionals who want to feel more energized about their work again find us. And if you want to take this thinking further, please follow me on LinkedIn, where I share content on a regular basis. You can also get on my email list by downloading the Career Satisfaction Assessment or through my website. All these links are in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in. I truly appreciate that you make the time for yourself to listen to the show. See you next week.